You guys. I'm so excited. I am so excited because, at this point, I'm totally 100% convinced. And I don't care if y'all aren't convinced, that's up to you, whatever. But there is something so cool that I want to talk about today. So, I was talking to Jared over at Christian Homestead, and I was like, what videos have you been doing lately? Just kind of, we talk about things quite often, and anyway, he was like, oh, well, I did a video about President Holland and how his funeral had rain in it, and how that was good because, there hasn't been any rain, and I live in Utah, so, I can attest to the fact that there has not been, rain or snow, and all of a sudden, there is rain, which is super interesting, and I was like, oh, did you mention... I'm just laughing because I always go back to Revelation 11. Whenever I think of President Nelson, President Holland, I think of Revelation 11. And I said, did you mention the fact that in Revelation 11, they had power to stop the rain? And he was like, no, I didn't mention that. I didn't even think about that. Now, I know I already can hear all of your little keyboards typing already, and you don't need to type it. But I know obviously there has been rain while they've been alive and while they've been in their presidency. I'm not saying that. It's just really interesting. Okay, this year has been one of the warmest. In fact, I think it has been the warmest winters in Utah. You can hardly call it a winter because it's been so warm. And so, anyway, I find this very interesting. One, that this church news article, when it's talking about President Holland's... Sorry about that. Anyway, I think it's very interesting that this news article points out the fact that President Holland was laid to rest in the new year. He died in 2025, was buried in 2026, which is interesting, and it was raining when they laid him to rest, which is just interesting. Okay, so yes, before you start saying in Revelation 11, because I'm going to read it to you, before you say oh, but it says that throughout their prophecy that it won't be able to read. I just want to say, one, I have made it, in fact, I don't know if I can do this publicly, anyway, if you haven't already, please subscribe. But I've made it so only subscribers can comment. And you might think that that's really rude of me, but I think it's rude if you don't subscribe to me, but you comment all these rude things. So anyway, to protect myself, I have made it so only subscribers can comment. But with that being said, if you subscribe only to leave me comments... shame on you, and you'll probably be blocked. So anyway, okay, cool story. Okay, so I want to talk about this now without going and making this video 2 hours long and talking about all the different reasons why I believe that President Nelson and President Holland have something to do with Revelation 11. Just kidding. I am going to go through all that. So yay for you. But it's really, really, really interesting. Okay. So one, I want to take you to this. I know I always take you to this, but I take you here because it is not my words. It's not me that's making a big deal out of this. This was published on Church News, and it was said by President Holland himself. So I'm going to read this really fast, and then I want to show you a clip from, okay. Before I shared this with you, I just want to point out again, in case you haven't seen my other videos on this, specifically where I talked about President Holland dying exactly 30 days, or sorry, exactly 3 months from the day that President Nelson died. I think that's significant, and I will show you why I think it's even possibly more significant now, and the events that took place after each one of them died. So one, President Nelson died, and then the very next morning was when the shooter in Michigan went in, crashed into that church building and opened fire and set that building on fire. And then he killed people, and then he also died the same way, right? And that's remember that, okay? Remember that. And then 3 months later, President Holland dies, where when they bury him, it rains, and they make a point to say, this is strange that it's rained on his funeral day because it hasn't rained in St. George. Like, it's been so dry here. So anyway, think of those two things. I want to read this, and no, you know what? Now is the time. So I'm going to open up to Revelation 11. Don't worry, I'll get to all the things that I want to get to, but I think this would make more sense for me to go here. So, okay, so I've read this all a whole bunch of times. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm going to read the parts that pertain to this video. So, I will give power to my 2 witnesses, that they shall prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. These numbers, I believe, are symbolic. These are the same numbers. 40 in 2 months is the same number, but in months, as these are to days. And then you're going to have the same 3.5 days. So those are 3.5 years, right? Then you're going to have 3.5 days where it's really interesting how President Holland's funeral was 3.5 days after his death. That's pretty dang quick for them to have a funeral. And to me, I'm like, okay, he died in 2025, and then 3.5 days later, it was a new year. I mean, it's just interesting, right? Like, I don't know all the reasons, but I think it's interesting. Okay, so, and they shall prophesy for 3.5 years, or for me, this is symbolic of an unfinished duration, or half of complete, right? So 7 is complete symbolically, and Revelation, you should always read Revelation through the eyes of symbolism. I'm not saying that everything's symbolic or nothing is literal or whatever. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, or like that this can't be fulfilled in a literal way where he just wrote it symbolically. Like, I'm not saying any of that. I am open to this being fulfilled in whatever way it is. However, I just find it so interesting that all of these things are correlating, and like, Anyway, so let me continue. And clothed in sackcloth. Now, what stood out to me this time, that I don't know if I've necessarily hit on. I think I've talked about the clothed in sackcloth, how it's like the world is wicked and all this stuff, but it would have been in days of mourning, so that could be wickedness, or it could just be sorrow, or it could mean that Satan has control, all these things. What is interesting to me about both President Nelson and President Holland is that their spouses had died, and they had mentioned over and over and over again how sad that made them and how they missed them. And President Holland specifically mentioned over and over and over again how much he missed Pat, his wife. And when he died, we were all so excited for him because he finally was able to return to her. But I think that's interesting that they were clothed in sackcloth, meaning that they were in mourning. Now, they could be mourning for the wickedness of the world, but also for their own circumstances as well, which I think is true. And I think there's a lot of nuance in that. Okay, I'm going to continue. Now, pay attention to these things because you're going to see a lot of where I'm drawing out these things that make me think of this revelation. It's all going to make sense, okay, by the end of this video. So, in verse 4, and they are 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of earth. Now, olive trees, you should think of anointed. So, olive oil, you are anointed, right? So, 1, anointed. Now, olive, or, oil, is also what would have maintained their lamp lit. So it's interesting. Sorry, just a second. Someone's crying. Okay, so the olive trees, meaning either anointed ones, 2 anointed ones, 2 prophets, 2 apostles, 2 presidents, President Nelson, President Holland. I don't know. I mean, I'm just putting thoughts out there, okay? And then the 2 candlesticks. So candlesticks would also be a lamp or a lampstand, or you could think of menorahs, right? Like, you could think of this however you wanted. But now stay with me, because President Holland, when he spoke 3 months earlier at President Nelson's funeral, which I will play for you, he talks about how President Nelson was a lamp. Like, I'll play it for you, okay? He talks about it right after he talks about them going to Jerusalem. It's really interesting, okay? I'm in a mood today. I like it. I'm liking this mood today. Okay, and it says, if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in manner be killed. Okay, so this one is interesting to me. In light of this new, kind of how we know what happened with President Holland and how he died, like, kind of the wrapping up of this, okay? So, to me, I can look back and be like, oh my goodness. So 1, I think verse 5, now this could be talking about anything. Now this is just one possible thing that my mind spun up today. But it could be other things as well, but I just think this is so interesting. So verse 5, talking about the fire that proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies, and if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So to me, this correlates, and that's all this is. It's a correlation, right? But this correlates with President Nelson. He died the next day. And what was he preaching this whole time? A peacemaker, be a peacemaker. All these things about being peacemakers and to not have contention. He spoke about not having contention over and over and over and over as prophet and apostle, even before. So, and Sister Wendy Nelson, his wife, would always say that he would love watching sports. He would love watching like basketball and stuff like that. He would love watching it. But the second it got contentious, he had to turn it off, because that contention, it just made the spirit leave, which it does. The contention does just like make the spirit leave. So it's interesting that he was teaching, be a peacemaker, be a peacemaker. And what happened after he died the very next day? This man who refused to be a peacemaker went and opened fire, drove his truck into a church building while innocent people were worshiping Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father. He drove a building, opened fire on these innocent people, killing them, and he was in the same way killed. It's just really interesting, okay? When the prophets and apostles speak, be a peacemaker, and then people refuse to be a peacemaker, and then in that same manner is killed. It's just really interesting, isn't it? Interesting? Okay. Verse 6. Okay. These two witnesses have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Now reading this, it reminds me of Moses, because we're learning about Moses right now in Come Follow Me. But we know, and President Nelson has talked about how the priesthood and the power in the priesthood has been restored in these days. So I think of Moses because he had these powers. God gave Moses these powers. It's priesthood. It's the same priesthood. But he gave them power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. And to have power, meaning that they have the same priesthood that Moses had. So to me, I've always looked at it that way we know that they have the same priesthood that Elijah had. We know that they have the same priesthood that Moses had. We know that they have the same priesthood that John the Baptist had. We know this because we live in the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We should know this, okay? But it is interesting that it rained not in the days of their prophecy. So verse 5, that seemed to have been at least a little bit fulfilled the day after President Nelson died. And that man opened fire on those people and in the same manner was killed. And then 6, with President Holland, he died and it rained. Sorry. I think that must have stopped. Anyway, it rained the day he was laid to rest. Interesting. And then when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. Okay, so anyway, I find this so interesting, okay? It's just interesting. So, I want to quickly go over this. I think together all of these things just make me sure that there is more than meets the eye with our prophets and apostles. And that might just be all that it is, right? But we have prophets and apostles on the earth today who have these same priesthood powers and everything. Okay, let me read this. Elder Holland said, this is a legendary land. This is when they went to Jerusalem. No, you know what? No, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to show you the video. The video from... Please hold. Please hold. Please hold. Where are you? Okay, right here. I have a lot of things open. Okay, I'm going to play this. Hopefully I don't get copyright strike, whatever, but I'm going to play a little bit of this clip for you. This is from President Holland 3 months before he died, talking at President Nelson's funeral. Okay, here we go.
Now, after President Nelson was newly set apart as president of the church, he and his supremely devoted wife, Wendy, determined that Jerusalem would be his first official destination. He wanted to feel the stones and touch the soil where Jesus, the Savior of the world, the Redeemer of all mankind, had walked. He paid us perhaps the greatest ecclesiastical compliment I have ever received by inviting Pat and me to accompany them. But the delight had only begun. President Nelson had decided we would circumnavigate the world with stops in places he felt prompted to visit. reviewing the membership strength in each region and announcing new temples for some of them. No matter how tired.
Okay, I want to pause for a second because that's interesting that he mentioned, they went to Jerusalem, they went around the world, and then they announced some new temples, which is just, to me, kind of interesting because when you read Revelation chapter 1, Revelation chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "And there was given to me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein." So it's just interesting to me that he said they would, what does he say? Reviewing the membership strength in each region and announcing new temples for some of them. So that's just interesting to me because to me that's like a measure of membership. That's a measure of people, measure of the temple, and also a measure of the people who go inside the temples. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to continue to let you listen for a bit longer because it's getting good. Okay, so he talks about Jerusalem. And then he talks about how they went and visited the rest, other parts of the world.
On any trip, President Nelson was always perfectly groomed and carefully attired as he stepped off the plane, casting that patented Nelson smile on those he met and to whom he spoke. Having the opportunity to see him love the people and the people to love him made for the most beautiful of memories. I have those memories in my heart now, today, and forever. They've often sustained me on days when the sun forgot to come up.
Okay. Again, I think this is a nod to the fact that he is in sackcloth. He is in mourning. Not coincidentally, President Holland has spoken a lot about mourning, about depression, mental health issues. It is interesting. Isn't it interesting? I think it's interesting. All right, let's continue.
Fighting these kinds of experiences for so many over such a long period of time, President Nelson was a lamp.
A lamp.
Rather than the feeble lamp lighter I was trying to become. And
Okay. You guys. Okay. He talks about going to Jerusalem with a prophet of God. How he felt so honored to do that. He talks about how he traveled other places and how they would measure the membership strengths and announce temples. Interesting. Okay. So far it's like hand in hand with Revelation chapter 11. And then he talks about how how this experience had kept him going when the sun forgot to come up, pointing to his mourning, meaning like sadness, right? Sackcloth. And then that he was a lamp, or you could say a candlestick, when he was trying to just be a little lamp lighter, right? A lighter, just that flickered, right? But that President Nelson was this lamp. It's so interesting. That's not even to show you his general conference talk where he talks about, how he wants to join his friend huddled in the streets of Jerusalem and sing Amazing Grace. Because Jesus Christ has saved him. Jesus Christ has opened his eyes to see. It's so interesting to me, you guys. It's just, you can't make this up. Okay, so now I want to take you to this one. And I know I've read this before, but I think it's worth saying over and over and over again, mostly because I'm always getting new subscribers. But every time I read this, and I've read it probably 50 times, every time I read it, I think, we have no idea. Like, we have no idea the significance of this. And I think I've cracked it, maybe, but it's like, he says that it can't be overstated. Okay, let me read it and then we'll discuss it. So, Elder Holland, in the church newsroom article, when they are announcing that President Nelson and President Holland went to Jerusalem, I'm just going to show up. Prophet visits the Holy Land. President Nelson continues his global ministry tour in Jerusalem. Now, he starts out talking about why prophets are needed, all this stuff. You guys can go and read it. But it says, this is a legendary land, Elder Holland said. It is a spine-tingling thrill for me to realize that I am in the company of President Russell M. Nelson, a modern prophet in every sense, that they were ancient prophets in Jerusalem in biblical times, with the same authority, remember, to close the heavens, that it rain not, or that fire, all the stuff that we talked about, the same authority and the same priesthood, and teaching the same gospel. Now, that's something that a lot of our Christian friends like to say that we don't do, is that we teach a different gospel. It's the same gospel that Jesus Christ and the prophets and apostles taught then, okay? All of this to say, he continued, our living testimony today is that we have a living prophet this very hour on this soil, standing in this land, teaching the same doctrine. The significance of that for Latter-day Saints and for the world, Latter-day Saints and for the world, cannot be overstated. That is at the heart of the thrill I feel today. During their visit to the Holy Land, the senior church leaders shared their feelings and witness of the Savior. Gethsemane is a significant name because it means the place of the oil press. Interesting. Oil press, oil tree, Gethsemane, right? Like, it is the Mount of Olives. It is an olive grove where the two olive trees would stand. The two lamps, the two candlesticks, where the oil from the olive trees are continually lighting their lamps. Oh, it's so good. It is so good. It is a significant place because of the oil press, President Nelson said. On the Mount of Olives, olives were brought to be pressed for their precious oil. So symbolically, under the weight of their sins of all mankind, Jesus was pressed. He sweat drops of blood. His precious oil as our Redeemer, our Savior. So Gethsemane is very important. It is where the agony of the atonement began, he continued. Okay, so prophets are a direct line to Jesus Christ, to that oil that provides us life and light and nourishment, right? And then this is just interesting. It says the church leaders left Jerusalem ahead of schedule due to concerns pertaining to the tension in the region and available airspace. They departed after today's district conference. They will commence the African portion of their trip sooner than they planned. Interesting that their time was cut short. Interesting that they did not prophesy for the full amount. Remember when I said that 3.5 was half of 7? It is incomplete. And they left sooner than had planned. Interesting. I think it's super interesting. All of these, I know that President Nelson was and is a prophet of God. President Jeffrey R. Holland was and is a prophet of God, right? We sustain them as prophets, seers, and revelators. I believe now that President Oaks, interesting, Oaks, tree, he is a prophet of God. I love you all so much. I hope this was interesting for you. If it was, please share it with other people who you think might be interested in it. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe. I love you all so much. We will talk soon.